Family concealed my grandfather's passing, denying me a final farewell. Now I'm considering severing all ties with them. My parents have been divorced since I was a kid. My father relocated once I went to college, and my grandfather, my father's dad, started battling cancer shortly after my sophomore year. He and my grandmother were unable to attend my undergraduate or graduate school graduations because of his illness. My father, on the other hand, voluntarily skipped my graduate school graduation, citing how it wasn't that important because he already saw me walk across the stage once. This, coupled with years of emotional abuse and neglect, led me to the decision to go low to no contact with my father about 2 years ago. While my relationship with him has been strained, I tried my best to maintain a connection to my grandparents, despite the several states divide between us. My grandfather was a man of few words, but our conversations were always genuine. The last time I remember seeing my grandfather in person, which was before the stuff with my dad happened, he gave me a big hug before going to the airport, a kiss on the cheek, and told me he loved me. I would call multiple times a month checking in, asking about their well-beings, and would sometimes hear my grandfather listening in on the other line. Each time I would ask my grandmother if I could speak to him, she would make up some reason as to why he couldn't come to the phone. She kept me up to date on his treatments, and I knew things were getting bad last summer. My mom and I were going to plan a trip to go visit my grandparents who live hundreds of miles away from me so I could say goodbye to my grandfather, as I had a feeling his time was coming. We didn't tell them of the trip and were going to do it as a surprise. The week before my mom and I were scheduled to fly out, I got a text from my aunt saying that my grandfather had passed. I was crushed. No viewing, no funeral, but they told me they were thinking of doing a celebration of life in the spring. They did cremate him, but no one other than my grandmother allegedly was present for it. I did call my dad to express my condolences, and he mentioned how my grandfather died disappointed in me because my father and I didn't speak anymore. This brings us to now. I called my grandmother to check in. She mentioned how she regrets and feels bad that I'm not as close to her and my grandfather as I am to my mom's parents, which is true, as for a period of time in my childhood, my mom and I lived with her parents. Growing up, we also lived about an hour away from them compared to the 12 to 14-hour drive it would take to see my dad's side of the family. The one that they see the most and interact with the most is more than likely the favorite grandchild. What? I have one other cousin on my dad's side, so was she implying I wasn't the favorite? But here's what made me skin crawl. She gave me a play-by-play of the weeks before my grandfather passed. Apparently, my grandfather had scheduled to do a medically assisted suicide, since the state they live in is a death with dignity state, 2 days after he had passed, which still would have been the week before my trip to see them. My dad, aunts, uncles and cousin came the weekend before to spend time with him and say their goodbyes. No one had told me of my grandfather's plan. No phone call, text, email, nothing. Then, the day of my grandfather's passing, the doctors asked my grandmother and the family present if they would like to administer a medication to keep him alive just a few hours longer so that other family and friends who may not have been present could have the chance to say goodbye. They declined, saying how my grandfather wouldn't have wanted that. His intestines twisted up because of his medications and caused sepsis, so he was in an exorbitant amount of pain. My face went hot on the phone. I understand not calling on the day of his passing when there's a lot of chaos and you're trying to process your own grief in that moment, but the fact that there was a plan for him to peacefully go that week, and I could have had a chance to say goodbye, makes my blood boil. Why didn't someone call or text about his intentions? The countless times I asked on the phone to speak to him, why couldn't she just put him on the line once? I truly don't want to believe that my grandfather was disappointed in me, but I'm starting to question why I was so out of the loop. Is it because I'm not the favorite? It took every fiber of my being to not lash out and scream as my grandmother sobbed, recounting the story on the phone. I mustered up the strength to not break down and found a way to get off the phone with my grandmother. I don't know what to think, but my heart is telling me that I am no longer part of that side of the family. If there even is a celebration of life, at this point, I'm not sure I would want to go. My mom suggested I write in and get people to weigh in, but she is on my side. She's been great through all of this. So Reddit, wth.reddit, if I continue this no contact and extend it to my dad's whole side of the family after they refuse to let me contact my grandfather and say goodbye before he passed away? Update 1. I decided to call my aunt, the one who had notified me via text that my grandfather had passed in the first place. She, I figured, would be the most straightforward about everything. I didn't initially go into it with the whole why didn't anyone call me so I could speak to him to say goodbye, but I wanted to get some answers. I wanted closure. I told her I was having a hard time understanding if he had a whole plan and I had numerous chances to talk to him, why I wasn't given the chance to. First, she let me know that she and seemingly her other siblings, including my dad, didn't know about my grandfather's wishes for a medically assisted death with dignity until after he had passed. She was consumed with her own grief of losing a father that she, or anyone, had the space to call me, as they were still trying to process their own emotions regarding his death. Up until the very end, he wasn't thinking about anyone but himself. He was a very selfish man, she said. As far as the whole, grandfather died disappointed in you, she vehemently denied it and apologized for my father's ignorance. She validated my feelings but questioned how much better it would have felt for me to say my goodbyes. I can't say for certain if it would or wouldn't, but I can speak to how I feel and it sucks. My aunt insisted I didn't have that strong of a connection to him, and compared my relationship to the one she had with him and my grandmother did. Realistically, how much of a part of your life was he? I wouldn't let somebody that didn't have that much of an impact on your life while he was alive have an impact on your life now that he's gone. I would certainly hope that my relationship with my grandfather is different than my grandmother had with her life partner. My aunt then said I didn't need validation from my dad's side of the family with all that I've accomplished in my life, but she's here if I need to talk. I'm still not sure how to move forward, but I've been journaling, per the recommendation of my therapist. Specifically writing about my grandfather and I's relationship, and the relationship with my father has been helping me navigate my emotions, seeing it written in words. We're also adding more grief counseling topics into our sessions, so there's that. That's all I have for now. I guess be on the lookout if I ever publish a memoir. Update 2. After conversations with my grandmother and my aunt, things have gone relatively quiet on their end. I moved states closer to home for a new job and have just been settling in the last couple of months since my original post. Fast forward to a few days ago, a colleague and I were looking at obituaries at some cold cases. We like true crime shows and podcasts, and I recommended Clues. One obituary we came across in a case that caught our eye was relatively short, which my coworker said he had never seen one with so little in it. I thought about my grandfather's obituary and said that my grandfather's was similar. I went to Google his to show my coworker, but to my surprise, I couldn't find it. I know my grandfather's first, middle and last name, DOB, date of death, the funeral home he was cremated in, etc. We both thought it was weird, and I just tried to brush it off. But when I got home that night, I began digging through the obituaries on the funeral home's website and newspaper articles in his town online. Nothing. It's like my grandfather's death never happened. Now, after several conversations with the funeral home, I can confirm Dad's family took my name off the obituary. My grandfather is now listed as being survived by one grandchild, my cousin. Not only that, but someone in the family asked for it to be taken off the website, which is why I couldn't find it. I don't know when they did this, the funeral home didn't divulge, but I do know that because I'm not listed as the direct next of kin, I can't change it back. A picture of him and I from when I was 2/3 is literally hanging in my living room. I'm at a loss for words. I can't even fathom how you have a conversation with someone of hey, why did you take my name of my grandfather's obituary? And change it to say he only has one grandchild. I don't even think it is worth expressing to them how deeply hurtful this is. I don't even want to bring it up to them. So that's I think where I will leave this. I'm going to continue to lean on my mom and her side of the family for guidance in all of this. And of course, therapy. Update 3. Dad's family still invited me to the celebration of life. Hi everyone. A couple months ago I shared my story of grieving my grandfather's passing, how my dad's family removed me from the obituary, and a brief glimpse of the toxic relationship between my father and I. About a month ago, I got a text from my grandmother. She invited me to my grandfather's celebration of life at her house. In the message, she told me it was going to be later this month, and that she realized it may be difficult, not to mention expensive, so if I couldn't make it she understood. She also extended the invitation to my mother. My grandmother was right, it was going to be expensive. After some careful consideration, knowing my dad would be there, and there was no way in hell I would ask him to skip out on his father's celebration of life, I decided I couldn't go. I told her I wouldn't be attending and said I couldn't continue to be in contact with that side of the family. The guilt, pressure, and pain, it's all too much. She said she understood and respected my decision. I took the time to block my other aunts and uncles on that side, so that leading up to the event, no one could try and make me feel bad for not attending. To the commenters and private messages that suggested I do my mini celebration of life, thank you. My mom and I a year earlier went down to the beach, talking about our favorite memories with him and eating his favorite snacks. And last week, I decided to have one final piece of closure, not just for my grandfathers, but for this chapter with my dad. I wrote letters to both of them, pouring in all my feelings and thoughts. Telling my grandfather I loved him and I was sorry that in his final moments, I wasn't allowed to be there. To my dad, unpacking the trauma and saying I would no longer be bound to the pain he has caused me. That I was no longer his daughter. My mom and I went out to the bay and I read them out loud. Then, we put the letters into glass bottles and threw them into the water, casting away these feelings I've been harboring for too long and saying one last goodbye to both of them. Surprisingly, I didn't cry as much as I thought I would, and my mom said I must have cried them all out ahead of time, and she was proud of me. We hugged and went home. Update 4. Two things landed in my life within 10 minutes of each other, and they both had my grandfather's name on them. The first was a DM from a friend with a video. Did you see this? She wrote. I recognized my grandmother's living room instantly, her floral curtains, the plate wall, the piano in the corner. It was a Facebook Live clip from the celebration of life I didn't attend. My cousin must have been streaming it for people who couldn't make it. People were packed in, plates on laps, paper cups in hands. Someone clinked a glass and my dad stepped up with a beer. His voice had that too casual tone he uses right before he says something he knows will land wrong, and he wants the chuckle before the drop. He said my grandfather valued family above all, and then he said, some of us showed up, and some didn't. In the end there was only one grandchild who wanted to be there. Someone laughed. Most didn't. He went on. It's not my place to call anyone out, but some people chose to walk away from Dad. He didn't want drama, he didn't want to chase people who didn't want to be included. He threw a quick look at the phone, so I know he knew it was streaming. My stomach dropped into my feet. I screen recorded it before it disappeared. I was walking around my kitchen trying to decide if I should text my therapist then or later when my doorbell rang. Certified mail. The sticker on the envelope had the return address of an estate law firm in my grandparents' city. I signed for it and stood there staring at the printed firm name like it might rearrange itself into something else if I blinked enough. I didn't sit. I opened it at the counter. The letter was on letterhead. It was short. The attorney wrote that he represented my grandfather's estate and that there was an item and personal message intended for me that had not been delivered at the family gathering. Per my grandfather's instructions, they were now attempting to fulfill delivery directly to me. He included his card and asked me to call to arrange an in-person delivery. I read it twice, then put it down and started shaking. I called my mom. She was at work and said she could talk for a second. I told her about the video and the letter. She was quiet and then said, "Call the attorney. Don't call your father. Call the attorney." So I did. The receptionist knew who I was as soon as I said my name. The attorney picked up himself a minute later. He sounded like the type who keeps everything very measured so you don't have to. He confirmed my address and phone number and then said the part that made me sit down on the tile. "We had your correct contact information," he said. "Prior to the event, a family member acting as a representative told us you did not wish to be contacted. That's why there was no delivery." I asked him to repeat it. He did. He didn't say the family member's name. He didn't have to. I asked if it was my father, and he said he couldn't disclose identities without the executor's consent. What he could tell me was that the estate's file documented the exchange and the instruction they'd followed. "What is it?" I asked. "What is there to deliver?" My hand was sweaty on the phone. "A sealed letter addressed to you and a key with a tag," he said. "The decedent's written note refers to a personal keepsake. And there is also a recorded message. The decedent's instruction was to deliver in person to you, or to no one." I stared at the video paused on my phone on the counter behind the lawyer's voice, the frame where my dad's face is tilted toward the phone, like he was daring me. "A recorded message?" "Yes," the attorney said. "We can play it for you here. The letter and key we will give you by hand." I don't know what made me think about the obituary right then, but I asked if he had access to any requests concerning the funeral home site. He was quiet a second. "I can confirm that the removal of the public obituary from the funeral home website was requested by," he said, "my father's name, via email. I cannot share the content of those emails, but the origin is documented." I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. It didn't feel like one. "Okay," I said. "Okay." He offered some times to meet. I said I needed to think about it for a day and would call him back. He said that was fine and reminded me the instruction was in-person delivery. I hung up. My first impulse was to throw my phone into a drawer and not look at any of it again, because I didn't have room for this kind of whiplash. Instead, I opened my photos and pulled up every screenshot I had of my call logs to my grandmother's number. The missed calls, the voicemail timestamps, the text messages where I asked for updates and asked to speak to him. I airdropped them to my laptop and printed them. I found the calendar reminders where I'd set call Grandpa and Grandma on Sundays. I put those in the pile too. I called my therapist and left a detailed voicemail. I texted my mom that I'd be over after work to talk. Then I sat at the table and watched the clip from the celebration of life again. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just felt tired down to the marrow. My therapist called back that afternoon between sessions. She stayed on the phone long enough to say I wasn't crazy, that the letter and the call logs were facts, and that if I went to the attorney's office, I should set conditions that would make me feel safe. She said neutral place, no surprises, and a plan for the aftermath. My mom said the same when I brought over takeout and spread my pile of paper across their dining table. She circled the call log where last summer I'd called 5 times in 2 days. "You're not going to get them to admit what they did," she said. "But you can get what your grandfather wanted you to have. Then you decide what to do with whatever comes next." "Neutral location, no father," I said. "No father," my mom said. "If he shows, you walk." I called the attorney back the next morning. I told him I would come to his office, but I wanted to be very clear that my father was not to be there. He said my father was not the executor. He said he would only notify the executor of the scheduled date and time, and he could arrange a private conference room with just him and a paralegal present. He asked if I had any accessibility concerns. I said my only concern was that I didn't want to be ambushed. He said he understood. We scheduled it for the following Tuesday. That gave me 5 days to exist inside the waiting. For those 5 days, I did my job, went to the gym, answered emails, and ignored 5 separate unknown numbers. That called me twice and then didn't leave a message. I turned off social media. I kept the letter from the attorney out on the counter like I might forget it if I put it away. I did not engage with anything that had my dad's name on it. The attorney's office was in a low building near the courthouse when I finally walked in. There was a lot of glass and brushed metal and the kind of beige carpet that looks expensive. The paralegal met me in the lobby with a smile that I could tell was meant to be reassuring. She took me down the hall to a small conference room with a screen on the wall. There was a box of tissues on the table. I sat with my hands in my lap and tried not to touch anything. The attorney came in with a slim folder. He sat, thanked me for coming, and said again that this wouldn't take long. First he took out a small envelope with my name on it in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. I knew it was his. You can stare at a loop G and know it. He set it on the table and put a metal key beside it, attached to a plastic tag with the name of a bank and the branch address. The tag had a number written on it too. My hands wanted to grab both and shove them in my bag and run, but I didn't move. We'll give you these when we're finished, he said. If you're ready, we can start with the video. He didn't make a speech. He dimmed the lights and pushed a button, and my grandfather was there. The screen showed him sitting in his chair next to the window in their sunroom. He had on his plain shirt and the sweater I've seen him wear 100 times. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen in person. He looked older than the last time I'd visited, but he didn't look like a stranger. He took a second before he started talking, like he was listening for something off camera. Then he said my name. He said it like he always did, short, no fluff. He said he wanted to say hello. He said he heard I was working hard. He said I was good at the things I do. He smiled a little when he said that part. He said he had asked to speak with me more than once and was told I couldn't be reached. He said he was told I was at work, or sleeping, or traveling, or that it wasn't a good time. He said he didn't want to push and make trouble. He put his hand on his knee and looked down when he said that, then looked back up like he decided to stop apologizing for something that wasn't his fault. He said he wanted me to know he was not disappointed in me. He said he was sorry for being a quiet man and not saying enough when he had time to say it. He said he loved me. He said I'm not small. Then he said, don't let anyone make you small. He cleared his throat and looked to the side, like someone behind the camera had said something. He nodded and said he had set aside something for me to keep. He said it knows the shape of my days. He smiled again, the way he used to when he'd tell us the same joke and wait for us to groan. You'll know it when you see it, he said. That way you can look at it and know I wanted you to have it. He ended with my name again. He told me to be kind to my mother. He told me to go outside more. He said that was all. He looked like he wanted to say something else, then the video cut. I didn't cry. My eyes stung, but it wasn't that kind of cry. It was like something had been pulled tight for a long time and suddenly went slack. I let out a breath and realized I'd been holding it since the screen turned on. The attorney turned the lights up. He didn't ask how I felt, which I appreciated because I didn't have a good answer. He slid the sealed envelope and the key across the table. I touched the envelope with the tips of my fingers and then put both in my bag. The key was heavier than it looked. He asked if I had any questions. I asked him directly if he had tried to contact me before the celebration of life. He nodded. They had sent certified letters and left voicemails, one of which came back marked undeliverable, which made no sense given it was the same address on the letter he'd used to reach me now. He said a family representative responded by email that I did not wish to be contacted and that the representative would relay anything necessary to me. Was it my father? I asked again. He paused long enough to be polite. I cannot answer that without the executor's permission, he said. And the obituary? I asked. I can confirm the removal request's origin, he said. He repeated my father's name. He added, carefully, that if I believed my access had been interfered with, I could consult counsel. He said he couldn't advise me on that. He was neutral. He asked if I wanted a copy of my grandfather's written instruction regarding the delivery. I said yes. He printed it and handed it to me. It was a simple line with my name and deliver in person or to no one in his handwriting, initialed and dated. I stuck that in my bag too. We stood up. He shook my hand and told me to call if I needed any documentation for my records. The paralegal walked me out through the lobby again, and the glass made me feel like I was on display and everyone could see I'd just been handed a piece of someone. I made it to my car and sat with the door open for air. That's when my phone started going nuts. First a call from an unknown number. Then a call from my father's contact name, which I forgot I hadn't blocked on my new phone number because I'd changed plans when I moved. I watched his name light up the screen, and I let it ring. Then the text started. You had no right, one said. The next, unbelievable. After everything. Then, I see you took what you wanted. It went on. I didn't read them all. I turned my phone face down on my thigh and watched people walk to their cars with briefcases and coffee cups like normal things were normal. A voicemail came in from my grandmother next. I almost didn't listen, but then I did. She was crying. It was the sound of her I know, the way her breath catches on the middle syllable of my name. She said she was sorry. She said there were things she'd never told me. She said she did what my father asked because she thought she had to. She said she wanted to explain before I decided anything. She asked me to call her back. She said please. Then she said my name again the way she used to when I was little and scraped my knee, and then she hung up. I sat there a few more minutes with my head back on the headrest. The envelope with my grandfather's handwriting was in my bag burning a hole. The key was in there too, with the bank branch address on the tag. Knows the shape of my days, he'd said. I could see his watch on his wrist in my head, how he'd look at it and call my grandmother in from the yard for lunch. I kept my hand away from my bag because if I touched the envelope, I was going to open it in the car, and something in me wanted to wait. I called the attorney's office back and asked the paralegal if I could use their conference room for one more meeting. I told her I would like my grandmother present and a third person in the room as a witness. I told her I didn't want my father to be notified. She said she'd have to check with the attorney and the executor but that she would call me back. She called me back 15 minutes later and said yes. She offered 2 dates. We picked the following Wednesday at 2. She said they'd have a staff member sit in and that the door would be closed. I drove home on side streets. I didn't want the highway. My phone buzzed until it stopped. I didn't answer anyone. At home, I put my bag on my bed and took out the envelope and the key. I put both on my dresser next to the picture of my grandfather and me from when I was 3. He's holding me on his lap and I'm wearing a hat with a sunflower, and I look like I think the world is very simple. I rested the key against the frame. I held the envelope in my hand long enough to feel the ridges of the handwriting through the paper, then I set it back down. My mom came over with groceries she didn't need to bring just to see me. I showed her the note and the key. I told her about the video. She sat on my couch and nodded and looked like she'd like to have a word with a few people. We talked about the meeting next Wednesday and what I would say and what I wouldn't. We talked about what I would do if my father showed up anyway. I said I'd walk. She said she'd be waiting in the parking lot. I texted my therapist that we'd need to move our session. She texted back that she could meet me Tuesday night if I wanted to prep. I said yes. I didn't open the envelope that night. I put it in a shallow dish on my dresser with the key beside it. It looked small there, like it couldn't possibly hold anything that might change how I feel. But I also knew it might. I told myself I would open it after I heard my grandmother explain what she thought needed explaining. I didn't know if that was a good idea or a terrible one, but it was the one that made me feel like I was steering something. I blocked my father's number. I didn't block my grandmother's. The next morning, there was a short email from the attorney confirming next Wednesday, names of who would be present, and a line about the scope of the conversation. He said he would be in the building but not in the room unless needed. He returned my signed copy of my grandfather's instruction for my records. He also said, carefully, that if any communications came to me from other parties that felt harassing, I could forward them to his office to be placed in the file. I appreciated the tone. It didn't make me feel dramatic for having boundaries. I went to work. I answered emails. My fingers hovered over my phone a few times because the urge to break my own rule and open the envelope to get some kind of immediate relief was strong. I didn't. When I got home that night, I cooked myself something simple and ate it on the floor by the coffee table because the couch reminded me of my mom's face last night and I didn't want to spin out. I took the video clip and the attorney's letter and my call logs and I put them in a folder. I wrote down questions for my grandmother because I didn't trust myself to remember what I wanted to ask if I had to keep steady in front of her. I wrote, "Why did you tell him I couldn't be reached? And who asked you to take my name off the obituary? And did you see my texts? And did he ask for me?" I wrote, "Do you think he was disappointed in me?" Even though I knew the answer now in his voice. I wrote, "Why?" 4 times and circled it like it could mean something different if I looked at it hard enough. I kept my door closed. I kept my windows open. I slept badly. I woke up early and went for a walk and thought about the watch my grandfather wore and how many hours it had seen that I never would, and how somewhere there was a box with something in it that he wanted me to have with my name on it. And I thought about my father's face in that video looking at the camera like he was controlling the story. And I thought about the fact that this time, he didn't. I don't know what my grandmother is going to say. I don't know if she's going to try to explain herself into a circle, or if she's going to tell me something I can unknot. I don't know if hearing it is going to make me angrier or softer. I do know that my grandfather took the time to say my name into a camera and tell me he wasn't disappointed in me. He told me not to let anyone make me small. I've been getting smaller in rooms with my father since I was old enough to understand what that felt like, and I am so tired of it. So I'm going to sit in a conference room next Wednesday with my grandmother and a third person to keep us honest. I'm going to ask my questions. I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to decide if I open the letter and the box this chapter is offering me, or if I put it somewhere high and leave it there. Either way, I will decide it. And for now, the envelope and the key sit next to a picture of a man who kissed me on the cheek before the airport and told me he loved me, and I'm going to believe the version where he meant it.